Hey guys, once again it's Mike from Nightmare on Maple Ave. This is part 2 of our build. It's our Halloween scissor prop mechanism build. This is part 2. Part 1, you saw we built the scissor mechanism for this prop. Part 2 is going to be basically building a base and kind of mounting this to the scissor prop. I put part 1 out there, and it's 42 minutes long. It's kind of boring. It's kind of me building the scissor prop, the scissor mechanism, I should say. I saved a little time. I pre-built the frame. I don't think this video is going to be that long. I'm just going to kind of talk through some things, and I'm not going to videotape myself actually doing the process. I'll kind of just kind of take pictures and video the end result. But basically, kind of give you an idea of what this prop's going to be. My Facebook group is Nightmare on Maple Ave, Advanced Halloween Props. It's a small group. We have about a little over 1,000 members now, but this prop is being built as a prize that I wanted to give out to our 1,000th member. Once we reached 1,000 members, we picked a name out of a hat, and one of our members won it. And I figured I would videotape the process of building it. This way, you know, those who didn't win, if they want to follow along and build one, you know, they can get a little help or a little idea. Some things, you know, everybody has advanced knowledge, different types of tools. I can't accommodate everybody. I mean, I can show you how to make this with just nuts and bolts, but I own a welder, you know, I own a saw, I own a drill press, I own a belt sander, I own a multitude of tools. You know, we get a lot of questions in the group, and I get a lot of messages, you know, asking, you know, can I build this for somebody? And, you know, I would love to build these things and sell them. I just don't have the time or the heart to do it. You know, people ask you, you know, how much do they cost? When this prop is all said and done, when you see it, the finished product, and hopefully part 3, you'll basically see that, you know, it's probably going to be about $100 in materials. That doesn't include my time, and of course your time has, you know, your time has value. But basically, you could build this. It range from somewhere between $50 to $100. I mean, it depends on where you get all your materials from. You can get materials off eBay, Amazon. If you get your steel stock from you know, buy it in bulk from a steel supply house, it's a lot cheaper than buying it at Home Depot. I tried to, you know, in this video, try to use steel that you can get at a local hardware store, Lowe's or Home Depot. So it's all steel stock. You know, I'm using steel on this one because, you know, I have a welder and I can weld things together. Kind of give you an idea of what the end product is going to be here. It's basically going to be a scissor mechanism to basically put on the ground or attach to the ground. You could put it on a tabletop, but you would have to clamp it down so it doesn't move. If you put it on the ground, the way I make it, I put in gussets in the corner, so I could you put in stakes into the ground and keep it from tipping over. The kind of way you mount, you know, the location where you mount your scissor mechanism kind of helps. You want to kind of mount it towards the back of your frame. As you can see here, I got 3/4 by 3/4 inch steel. You know, I cut it to, you know, 12 inches wide by 18 inches long. Basically, it's going to be running lengthwise on the 18-inch length, basically, so I could mount it here. I don't know if you can see that. Turn it to the side. This is the 18-inch length. I'm going to mount it here somewhere, and, you know, when it extends, it won't want to. It will try to tip over, but it will have a difficult time doing it, especially if it's mounted to a table or staked into the ground. Again, this is the way I build them. People build them differently. I try to do a generic type prop. You know, when this is all said and done, the winner could, you know, easily attach a doll to it, a dog, something, maybe something coming through bushes or something. It's all up to them. I mean, you got to use your imagination. I can't tell you everything. A lot of times I just build a prop or a mechanism, and then I figure out later, more towards Halloween, where what I'm going to attach to it, what's going to jump from it, what's going to be the ultimate scare. But anyway, let me get back to the frame. It's 12 by 18, 3/4 by 3/4 inch by 16 inch 6 steel. Cut it at 45-degree angles, and I welded it all together. Basically, at this point, I was talking about staking it to the ground. I made up these corner gusset plates. Not everybody does this. I kind of do it. I thought it would be easier for the person who gets this prop. Just a corner gusset plates, 4.5 inches by 2-inch steel with a 1/2-inch hole. And I'll weld these to the corner. And like I said, I'm not going to videotape everything. I'm not going to videotape me welding all 4 of these gussets in. Maybe I'll videotape one going in. But basically, you're going to have one gusset each corner. It'll kind of it'll serve 2 purposes. It'll basically strengthen this corner up a little bit. So if your welds aren't as great, mine are okay. I don't know the strength of them. I mean, I think they're pretty good. They look good. Usually, if something looks good, its function is good also. But basically, I'm going to have a bracket in all 4 corners. Again, this is 1/8 inch thick, 1/8 inch thick, 2 inches steel stock. You can get it at Home Depot or Lowe's. I cut it at 45-degree angles, basically so I could mount it in these corners. It'll be hidden underneath. It'll be on the ground. All this will be painted, of course, so the steel doesn't rust on the person. Basically, you're going to have on the upside, I need a place to attach this, and I need to attach it with attach an upright that something slides on, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But I need to attach something to this frame that's going to attach the upright. So I decided to use this. I got this this 2-inch channel, steel channel. So again, it's 1/8 inch thick, 3/16 of an inch thick. I cut it to the width of the frame, basically so I could stick it on there. I cut out I ground out the edge. I don't know if you can see that. Let me see if I could zoom in a little bit here. I cut out the edge so it fits over the frame, and then I can weld it in nice and flat and flush. I don't know. I think it's gonna be about 3 inches from the edge, 3 inches from here to this edge. That'll give me a little more leverage, so the frame doesn't want to flip over when the prop is extended. Well, again, I'm not gonna bore you with sitting here welding all this stuff up. Like I said, I'll weld one up, and then you could kind of guess at the others. I don't know how easy it'll be for the camera to see welds, but I think it's just going to black out the camera. But so if it does, just forgive me. Maybe I'll edit it out. I did a little editing for the first time on part 1, so each time I do a video, I'm learning something new. But basically, you can hear my dog barking. She's a pain in the butt. I don't know what she's barking at. Something might be breaking into my house. I have no idea. But I'm gonna throw one of these gussets in. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be pretty. It's going to be underneath. It's going to be painted. Usually I won't even clamp this down, but for this project, I'm going to clamp it down. Like I said in part 1, you're working with this metal. You're grinding the metal. You're cutting the metal. It's really smart to wear a pair of safety glasses. I got these big giant ones that cover a good portion of your eye. Most of the time I forget to wear them, and I don't wear them anyway. That's when an accident's going to happen. Is when you actually don't. So basically, let me see if I can kind of put this down, kind of show you what I'm doing here. I just threw the gusset on the corner. I mean, you can see where it is. It's up here on the corner. I'm just going to weld it in place, a couple tack welds, and then I'll shut the camera off, turn the video off, or fast forward through it, whatever, and kind kind of weld all 4 of those in. I just, I could do this at the end. I'm particular. I like to do things in the kind of steps that I think of them. I really don't want to, do it later. I thought it should be done now, so I'm going to do it now. Yeah, if you're going to get into building these, a lot of these mechanisms like this, invest in a fairly good, decent little 110 volt, 115 volt welder, flux core welder. I mean, it's simple. Anybody can do it. I mean, it's a pull of the trigger. It's really like gluing metal together. Yeah. I mean, it takes a little. It takes a little practice, but it's nothing you can't learn on YouTube. I mean, everything you need to know is on the internet. So let me weld one of these up. Kind of get this going. Like I said, I'll weld one and I'll kind of pause it and show you when I'm all finished. Well, one thing I forgot, and I didn't even think about this, but this is the first time I'm using this stuff, but I got this can of anti-splatter spray. When you tend to use flux core, it tends to have a lot of splatter as compared to when you have a shielding gas. I'm not even going to get into that. You can learn that on the internet. I use flux core, which it doesn't require any gases or anything to weld. You just pull the trigger and you weld. But you get a lot of this tiny little slag on here. But you got this can. It's not bad. It's $7 for this can. It's just a little simple spray. You can weld right through it. But it prevents any of that slag from sticking to your steel, so you really don't have to clean it up. It saves a lot of time. As you can see, I'm not going to weld the whole edge. I'm just going to put a couple tacks on there. You don't really need to be a lot of weld. You're not holding up a bridge. Basically, it's just a couple little tacks, probably 1/2 inch long, 3/4 of an inch long. You might put one or two on the other side. Now remember, if you have the flux core creates slag, and the one thing to remember when you're flux core welding, and it rhymes, if it creates slag, you must drag. You should always drag so you're not trapping that slag in your weld. Like I said, one of the other things I love to have all the time, and I don't like lifting my head up, is I got one of these automatic darkening helmets. I mean, they're not bad. This one was about $100. You can get them really cheap at Harbor Freight, but this one was about $100 at Lowe's. It goes down to 9 to 13 adjustable. Yeah, it just prevents you from constantly putting your helmet up, every time you stop welding. So I'm going to kind of pause this now, weld this all up, kind of figure out where we're going to put that upright brace. I might weld that up and then kind of come back to it in the video. Alright, I just took some time, finished up welding the corner gussets. I don't know if you can see them. Let me see if I could figure out this camera. Again, I could build props better than I can make videos. So basically put a corner gusset in here. I got my welds in there. They're not too bad. I mean, you don't have to really worry about them. They're functional welds. They're not the prettiest things in the world, but I really don't give a crap because it's going to be upside down like that, and the only part you're going to see is this inside corner, which looks really good. It's not a lot of pressure on this thing. It's not a car driving over a bridge. It's a Halloween prop. Basically, I'm done with those gussets, the corner brackets, braces, however you want to put it, hold downs, however you want to say it. They're kind of ready to move on to start mounting the scissor prop mechanism. And like I said before, I want to mount it kind of back towards one end. I don't want to mount it in the center. I kind of want to mount it off to one side. This way, you kind of get a lot of. You don't want any uplift. You don't want this thing to uplift, basically like this. When you get extension, it's going to have a lot of weight, depending on what you put on the end of this. I mean, this weighs probably 7 to 10 pounds, maybe 6 pounds, 8 pounds. It's a lot of steel, but once it's extended, there's a lot of pressure out here on the far end. Once it's extended, especially you put a 10-pound prop on the end. You have the weight of the steel plus the weight of the prop, and that's a lot of weight. You know, kind of pushing and wanting to topple this thing over. So hopefully, hopefully the person who gets this will kind of understand, you know, putting the stakes in the ground and putting them on an angle so, you know, it can't lift up through the mud. You put, you know, I use most of my props, yeah, and my tombstones, you know, all have this type of a half-inch hole, and then I have 1-inch steel stakes with an L bent on the end, and I just push them on the ground, but I push them in on an angle. I mean, if you push them straight down, when this kind of comes up, it'll kind of pull right out of the mud, especially if it's mud or if it's soft soil. So you put them in on an angle, and it'll have a hard time lifting up. But again, that's some things you guys are going to have to figure out. You know, you can't learn anything off the internet. You got to learn something. So I decided anyway on this C channel. I decided to kind of mount it 3 inches from the edge of this steel here to the same edge of the C channel. So I'm just going to go 3 inches back, kind of measure it. Again, this doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be exactly the way I'm doing it. You can make up your own measurements the way you feel. You think you're going. You know, this is the way I've been doing this for 15 years. This is probably the I don't know. I can't count how many of these scissor prop mechanisms I made for my front yard. But again, they weren't all mounted, you know, on a base like this. Some of them were mounted on a pole. Some of them were mounted inside a box. Like I said, I'm going 3 inches and 3 inches, just kind of measure it off. I'm going to square it up best I can. You do want to make sure things are square and level, I should say. You know, sometimes you're out of square with your frame. You know, if you mount this crooked and then mount your scissor prop mechanism upright to it, even though this is crooked, that might be straight, or just the opposite. This might be crooked, and your scissor mechanism might be straight, or you know, a multitude of different things. Just use a square. You know, do the best you can. Again, it doesn't have to be exact, perfect. The only thing that has to be exact and identical is the metal for this scissor prop. I can't stress that enough. Everything else you can get away with being a little bit off. So basically, I'm going to throw this in here, and then I'll kind of think about what I'm going to do. I really don't like welding on my workbench, so I'm just going to kind of throw this in here, give it a couple of tacks together. Really doesn't have to be perfect. Again, you know, I'm not going to weld up this whole thing on camera. You really don't want to sit there and watch me you know, work for 42 minutes. I'm trying to keep this, you know, shorter than 42 minutes. But you know, this is you know, without doing a video, I can make this faster. I can make it quicker, but you know, talking through it is just, you know, it's time consuming. That's why I don't do a lot of videos. Like I said, it's time consuming, and I don't really have much to say. I don't know what to say on videos, and people don't want to hear me talk. I mean, I really don't have much to say, but you know, except to talk about exactly what I'm doing here. But you really don't want to do, unless you want to build the exact same thing I'm building. You know, if you put some questions in the comments on Facebook or even on a YouTube video, I'll answer the questions. You know, if there's something I miss, and I'm going to miss a lot. Again, I'm not going to say I'm the best at making videos, but let me weld this up with a couple tacks on here, and then we can move along. Get my ground on there. Oh, see, this is the problem. You got to sit here and play with this damn camera, and I'd rather just work. But I don't, like I said, I don't mind. I know there's a few people out there who appreciate the videos. I know I appreciate learning from other people who know what they're doing. So, like I said, I can only hope that people appreciate what I do. Let me weld this up and I can move along. Just put a couple little tacks on there. That looks good. Enough to hold it in place, that's for sure. I'm not going to weld it all up on video for you. It's kind of boring if you ask me, watching me work. But, you know, wire with the slag off of there. See, like I said, I leave my shop safety glasses on the bench, and I don't use them, but they're always available. Now, if I wanted to leave that like that, I could. It really isn't going to go anywhere. I mean, that's a pretty good hold. But you know, off camera, I'll sit there. I'll put a little more welds on the underside where you can't see them, and they'll be strong, but they'll be ugly. And like I said, who cares about ugly? That spray, this spray here, this one is, I bought this at the local welding supply store, GW Goodlift. Give them a plug. I don't buy much from them, but this one's Weld Aid. This is actually nozzle clean number 2. I mean, this is pretty good stuff. I don't know if you can see that, but let me back this camera up. This is some pretty good stuff here. Nozzle clean number 2 is a black can. Weld Aid is the brand, but it's pretty good stuff. I mean, it saves a lot of time grinding off that slag, and you just wipe it off. I mean, really, and it really evaporates. You want to use it in a ventilated area. I mean, I've been working in my basement here for, I don't know, 23 years, and only this past weekend did I put in a vent to vent the welding gases. So probably too late by now. I'm probably gonna die from welding gases. But alright, so now I got to figure out, I'm not going to sit here and videotape me thinking about this, but I got to figure out which angle I'm going to use. I sort of want this prop. Let me see if I can back this camera up. Get this whole thing in here. Basically, this is the way you're going to see it on the ground. Here's the scissor mechanism. For the upright, I'm going to use 3/4 inch steel. Not this piece, of course, it's too short. And I'm going to want to mount this here. On this but I want to mount it on an angle. I don't want this scissor mechanism coming straight out. I actually want it to come up on an angle. I don't want it to come up as it's going out. A lot of times the way you attach this, your scissor mechanism will actually go up as it's coming out. I don't want that. I just want it to start on an angle. A little bit of an angle, so that when it's extended, it kind of goes out and up. This way, you got people. You know, it's going to be mounted on the ground. You want it to go up towards the people who are looking at it. You can give them a little better a scare than if it's running. You know, if you attach a dog to it and it's running at their knees. So you know what? I think I'm going to kind of mount this so it's removable. There's so many different ways to mount this. Let me think about that, and once I think about that, I'll turn the video camera back on, and we'll figure out something. All right, I did a little work off camera. Again, I don't want to make this video 3 hours long, so kind of let's review what we got so far. We got a 12 inch wide by 18 inch long steel frame made out of 3/4 by 3/4 inch steel tube, 1/16 of an inch thick. We got our corner gussets in. These are going to be to hold it to the ground or hold it to a table, however a person wants to do this. But you know, that's the way I built it. I got a 2-inch channel. Again, all this stuff can be bought at Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever. I got it mounted across as a cross member. I got 3 inches from this edge. You can see from this edge to this edge is 3 inches. Should give me plenty of leverage to keep this from popping up when the extension, when the scissor prop extends. Where we kind of left off, and I flipped off. I needed it upright, to attach our scissor mech to. So, you know, I decided to, I don't know if you can see this, I'll kind of zoom in on it, but I installed these 2 pieces of steel to attach my upright to. These 2 little pieces of steel, they're on a 12-degree angle. That's the angle I decided to go with. You could decide to go with whatever angle you want. But basically, they're going to hold up a 3/4 inch tube. That's going to be the upright, which is going to be the basically the mount for the scissor prop, or the scissor mechanism, I should say. But basically, it's I had a 1/4 inch thick steel by 3/4 inch wide. I cut them at 3 inches long. Again, I cut a 12-degree angle on them, and I welded them perfectly in the center of this bracket here. I don't know if you can see that. Let me just kind of zoom in here. Again, I'm playing with the camera and trying to do this. I do this all by myself. I get no help from my family. Not that I ask for it, but they would definitely help if I asked them. But it's early in the morning here, and they're all still asleep. So, like I said, I got these uprights here. I needed something to attach the scissor mechanism to, so I made up this. I think it's, I don't know, it's 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch steel upright. I cut a half or a 12-degree angle on one end, and I think I cut it to 16 inches long. And basically, this one goes in here. I don't know if we can see that. Let me zoom out here. Move the camera up. This way you can see what the heck I'm doing. It's just going to be mounted on by, you know, 2 1/4 inch bolts. Once you tighten these things up, it's not going anywhere. Basically, I needed this base and this support to be 2 pieces, and you'll understand the reason for that in a second. It all has to do with the slide that's going on here. If I welded this upright to this bar and eliminated this area where we're bolting it, you know, I would never be able to get the slide off. And I'll show you the slide in a second, and I'll explain the slide. But basically, up here, I don't know if you can see it. This is going to be the pivot point for the top of the scissor mechanism. It's another 1/4 inch thick piece of steel. It's 1.5 inches long. From end to end, it's 1.5 inches long, and I drilled a 1/4 inch hole, 3/8 of an inch from the edge to the center of the hole, 3/8 of an inch. And that's basically we're going to be mounting the scissor mechanism to. You know, I did a pretty good weld on this corner to weld this mount to this upright. I'm going to call this the upright. Welded this on both sides. It's not going anywhere. Again, my welds aren't pretty, but they're definitely strong. But basically, that's where we're going to mount our scissor mech to. Let me find the bolts here. I thought I had all my nuts and bolts here, but apparently not. Oops. Let's see what we got here. But basically, again, I'm not going to use washers or anything. This is all just for the mock-up, for getting this thing kind of where you want it. Once you have it all built and it's working smoothly, then you could put washers on it and do whatever you want. I mean, it's up to you. I very rarely use washers. It all depends on the situation itself. You think you need a little more support for your nut, then you know, by all means use a washer. But I gotta leave that up to you. Again, you got to use, everything is improv in building these props. It's all trial and error in my book. Here's my nut. I found my nut. I'm going to use a wing nut for now because I got to keep taking this bolt on and off, on and off, on and off. So I'm just going to use a wing nut. So basically here we have our scissor mechanism mounted to our upright. This is the pivot point. This point's never going to move. It's just going to pivot at that point. And if you can see this, it comes straight out. It all depends on how you mount this bottom point. And if you notice on all of these, one of these ends has to move. This end has to move, or this end has to move. If this end is static, this end has to move. If this end is static, like on my prop here, this end has to move. So this end has to be able to slide up and down this way as this gets extended. Has to come back down, has to go out. But basically, there's our mount, and that's kind of where we stand now. So I have to figure out a way to connect this bottom of this mechanism here to this upright and have it slide. Now, I've done it in many ways. I mean, there's so many ways. You go on the internet, and a lot of people make these, and they make them different ways. It all depends on how much time I want to spend on it and how much money I have. There's simpler ways. There's more convenient ways. In the past, I've done it with bearings. Roller bearings. Here's a roller bearing. I don't know if you can see it. A roller bearing, but that's a roller bearing. It makes it just so much simpler and easier for this thing to move. If the smoother everything is, the easier it is for your air cylinder or your pneumatic cylinder to extend this. There's a lot of forces here. Let's talk about why we need a ball bearing that would probably would roll on this upright up and down with this as it extends. As this extends, if you have a roller bearing on here pushing against this, it would be very smooth, and the roller bearing would roll up and down on this upright. When this mechanism is extended, there's a lot of force at this point here pushing that way. There's a lot of force pushing that way. So if you have a roller bearing on there, it just makes things so much smoother. But again, it would take a lot more work, and this video would be 5 hours long if I had to do my method with the roller bearings. I mean, if anybody has any questions, I could kind of talk about that and get pictures of another prop that I made with the roller bearing. But I found on the internet, which is helpful, another haunter, whoever started doing this. It's kind of it's not the easiest way, it's not the smoothest way to accomplish movement here and having a place to attach your cylinder. But basically, it's to have a square tube. I don't know if you can see this. It's a square tube. Let me kind of. It's just a square tube. Now, I made this one up, but it's a square tube that fits perfectly on your 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch steel tube with very little play. It's kind of, unless you have a scrap supply yard or a metal supply yard or a metal supply shop in your neighborhood, it's going to be really hard to find a piece of square tube with the inside diameter just slightly bigger than the outside diameter of your upright. So I just found it easier to make these things. Again, it takes a little more time, but the way I make them is, I don't know if you can see this. Let me back out. But basically, you have to make a square tube that's bigger than your upright steel. So basically, I took some 1¼ by 1¼ angle iron, let's see if I can zoom in on this here. I got some 1¼ by 1¼ angle iron, and I make my own tubes. Again, here's my 3/4 inch tube that I'm using as the upright. So basically what I did was I take the 1¼ by 1¼ angle iron, and I place it in the place it around the steel, and you cut it here, you cut it here, and you cut it here, and that gives you a piece of angle iron that's just flush with the top here. Just flush with the top here. Here and here, they're flush. Then you take another piece of angle iron, the 1¼ angle iron, if I can get that, and you put it on top there, basically surrounding your upright with the angle iron. And then you make another mark here on this angle iron and on this angle iron. You cut this angle iron off, you cut this angle iron off. If you make one first, make this one first, put it on there, see how it's flush? It slides up and down on the upright pretty well. Especially once you get it all done, you grease this upright up, and it'll slide on there. It might wear out your paint, but who cares? Like I said, you put one on there. Put one of the angle irons. These angle irons are again 1¼ by 1¼ and I cut mine at 2 3/4 of an inch long because that's all I needed for this prop. But basically, put the other one on there, and you use a grinder or use a saw, mark it, and slice this excess off. I don't know if you can see the excess here. You got some excess steel here. You just want to cut it off. Let's see if I can find a pencil so I can point here. Got this extra overhang here, so you kind of want to make a mark on there. I made a mark with my grinder. You make a mark on there, flip it over, make a mark on this side. And, once you got your mark on there, then you cut it. I got this one ground out. Once you have them cut, basically you have 2 tubes that will fit around your upright perfectly. Once you have that done, if you have a welder, again, this is a method. If you have a welder, you kind of put it on around your upright, and you kind of weld the seams. You're going to have to weld 2 seams. You're going to have to weld where they meet, which is one here and one here. I think I don't know where I got the other one. Yeah, there's one here, and then there's one here, and one here. So basically, that's it. And that's what I'm going to use to attach the bottom of this scissor mech to the upright. But basically, you can see why I wanted these bolts in here and not welded. I didn't want this to be static. I needed this to be removable. So if you have any trouble with this, or the person who gets this prop has any trouble, you can take it apart. I might be able to take this apart for shipping it to the person. Might be a little easier, but basically, to make things tight, you want to slip your angle on it, your square tube, the little square tube slide that you made. Put it on there and make sure it slides up and down pretty well. Make sure sometimes it's a little tight, at one angle or one way you put it on. See how it's a little tight here? I don't want it that way. You want it to slide freely. It has to slide up and down freely with the movement of the scissor mech. So basically, slide that on your upright. Put your upright back on your prop. I'm using an awl just to pump the hole, make things easier for me for the video. Basically, now I have this slide that's on the upright, and this slide slides up and down. The bottom of this pantograph or scissor mech will be attached to this slide, so this slide is able to move upwards as the pantograph extends. I don't know if you can see that, but as that pantograph extends, that slide's going to slide up. It has to move. If this doesn't move, if this is bolted to this upright, this pantograph cannot extend, or the scissor mech cannot extend. I need something to slide up and down. So some smart person on the internet, and probably one of the haunt groups, came up with this idea, and I kind of ran with it. There's many ways to do this. So I needed a way to attach this to this slide, and I don't want this slide when my scissors, when my mechanism is closed, or when my scissor mech is closed. I don't want this slide to come down and hit that steel, so I'm going to leave about 1/4 of an inch between the steel and this slide, and that's kind of where I'm going to mount my secondary mount, or my pivot point. I don't know if you can see that, my pivot point for the bottom of the scissor mech. And this is kind of really easy, especially if you have a welder. At this point you kind of tighten everything up. You know, I need another bolt here, but basically this pivot point is going to be mounted to that slide, basically in that location there. That location is going to be determined by the tightness, or by where the bottom of your scissor mech lands on your slide. And that's why you should, at this point, basically have all this tightened up. Once you have this tightened up, it's going to determine where this meets this slide. The bottom of this scissor mech meets this slide. So I'm just going to tighten the top up. Once I tighten the top up, it basically aligns the bottom of the scissor mech with the center, or where this is going to be mounted to this slide. So this can't move that way, and it can't move that way. So basically that's where I'm going to attach this slide to. Let me get a bolt. Matter of fact, I got one here. I'm going to take this bolt, 1/4 inch bolt, and I'm going to slide it through that little piece I made. Now this little piece at the bottom, I basically made it identical to the mount at the top. It's 1/4 inch thick steel, 3/4 of an inch wide. The one at the top was 1.5 inches long. I made this one shorter to accommodate for the thickness of the slide, so that the distance from the upright to the center of the bolt at the bottom is the same as the center of the bolt to the edge of the upright at the top. So the distance here, center line of the bolt to the edge, the flat edge, the inside flat edge of this upright, is the same as the center line of the bolt here to the flat edge of, not the slide, but as to the upright. It just makes things kind of look better. It's gonna help the pneumatic cylinder kind of push this out. There's a lot of forces here, and we'll talk about that in a second. But basically, you know, you close this up. So that's where this wants to sit. I don't know if you can see this. Let me take the camera off of there. It might be a little easier to. I don't know if I'm still recording, but I'm definitely going to run out of battery in a second. So let's see if you can see that. That's where I'm mounting this. So being that I tightened everything up and it can't move towards the camera or away from the camera, wherever this falls and lands against that, that's basically where it's going to get welded. That's where it's going to get attached. But like I said, I don't want this slide touching this steel whenever this comes down, so I'm going to move this up a little bit and leave about 1/4 inch. This bolt is going to have to remain loose, so this will be a pivot point. This is a static point. Most likely in the back of this slide is where I'm going to attach my cylinder to. So basically, you know, I'll weld this up. I'll get this all welded up, and we'll pretty much have a completed scissor mech without the cylinder. Basically, right after this point, right after we have this connected, and once you have this welded up, you sit there and you got to start testing things. You got to make sure everything moves as you move along. As you add a piece, test it, move it back and forth. You know, that's just the nature of the beast. It's all trial and error, and that's building props. So I'm going to get this welded up, And once I get this basically welded up, that'll be the end of part 2 of this, the video of building this. Sit here, I have to sort of determine, I don't have the cylinder I need for this, I haven't determined it yet. Once I get this built, we'll figure out the distance that this has to slide up and down, and that'll give me the distance of where my cylinder is going to be mounted. I have this, I have this cylinder lying around. It kind of gives you an idea of where you want to mount it. There's a couple different ways you can mount this. You can mount this sticking out the back and attached to some point here. It might be the easiest force on the cylinder. The bore size of the cylinder. The bigger the bore size, and let's talk about a cylinder for a second. The bigger the bore size, meaning the diameter, the outer diameter of this, or the inner diameter of this cylinder, the more force is applied to this plunger, for lack of a better term. And the smaller, of course, the smaller you get, the less force you have. You go on the McMaster car catalog or McMaster car site and look up air cylinders, and they give you a chart, and they tell you for what size cylinder bore how much force you're going to get out of it. Trying to determine how much force you're going to need to move these, it's going to be on you. I mean, use your best judgment. I mean, you know what 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 30 pounds feels like, and that'll kind of give you an idea of a range. The bigger the better. I mean, wherever you could stick a cylinder in, and if you go with a bigger bore diameter, it's just going to make things easier for the thing to move back and forth. But basically, like I said, there's kind of a couple of ways to mount this. You can mount it, either side of this. You can mount it in this area, which connects here, connects on one of these bolts maybe. But as you can see, as this moves, this cylinder is going to have to move and be mounted on a pivot. It's not going to be able to, you can't basically mount this static in a position where this cylinder can't move, because this moves. This moves that way, it moves left and right, and it also moves, the point where your attachment is, moves laterally. So this is going to want to move and pivot as this scissor mech extends. I think the best way I'm going to do this, I think, again, it all depends on what cylinder I get, but I think I'm going to mount mine in basically in this position, and to have it activate, I'm going to have the cylinder pull instead of push on the mechanism. But so basically, to extend this this scissor prop, this cylinder is going to pull, and it will pull up on this. Let me see if I can do this in a second. It'll pull on this, and as it pulls, it'll extend, and then it'll push, which will retract our scissor mechanism. I think that's the best bet, but this way it requires a lot of force. Basically, as a scissor prop extends, right now, the most force required to get this started to move is right now, at this point, at this position, at this closed position. It's not going to get easier for the cylinder till it gets to about a foot out, where there's very little or less resistance. Once you kind of get to this point where they're all open, they're all open. Once they're all open, it's a little easier on the cylinder, and that's why you see a lot of these. You see a lot of props, a lot of scissor mechanisms. Maybe it doesn't happen to other people. It happens to me a lot. Basically, a lot of times when you activate your cylinder or activate your prop, your scissor mechanism tends to start slowly, and once it gets to a certain point, it shoots out really fast. Again, that's because of the forces at the beginning. The forces required to get this thing started are greatest at the beginning, or at the start of the stroke of the cylinder. But once it gets past a certain point, it makes things so much easier, and you still have the same amount of force on the cylinder. It's just requiring less. At this point, it's requiring less force to extend that scissor mech. So I think I'm going to get this welded up, and then we'll kind of we'll finish up with this part of this video. So let me get this welded up, and you can see what kind of make things a little easier to see what's happening. So I got my bottom, the bottom of my scissor mechanism attached to the bottom pivot point. I welded it all up. I don't know if you can see that. Let me kind of zoom in there. Definitely see that. I welded that up. Basically right to the point where it sat. Like I said, it's going to determine when you tighten everything up and lean it against that slide. That's going to determine where it gets welded, and that's the point where it got welded to. Again, you can see this shit. This is where it got welded to. I'm not gonna try to change it or anything. It just that's the length you have. That's where it's going to sit. Enough on that. But basically, we have a completed scissor prop without a pneumatic cylinder attached to it. But as you can see, as this extends, this point here has to pivot, which it does. You have a nut, a bolt, a nut, a lock nut, I should say, just loose enough so that it moves back and forth. This point, our slide, moves, let's say, I'm not going to measure it right now, but we got 4 inches. This moves 4 inches, and I can measure it out. Just at this being a 45-degree angle, or I'm sorry, like a 90-degree angle, which I explained in kind of the first one. When I extend these things, you get to a point where you get past this, it gets a little harder for the cylinder to push it back. So I kind of like to, determine my cylinder length by where it's extended at where this makes a 90-degree angle or a perfect square. You can go a little more. It's up to you. Again, it's a learning curve. But basically, as this slide moves up and down this bar 4 inches, I mean, let me measure this point to this point. I got 40 inches at the end. So I got 40 inches of extension with 4 inches of movement here. And that's the idea behind this type of mechanism, is to use a little cylinder, use up a very small amount of space, but get a long extension out of it. To whatever you mount to here, you can mount like a little, whoever gets this could mount a little small doll, a Chucky doll, or something spooky, something that could jump out behind a bush or whatever. Again, you got to use your imagination. I can't teach you everything. I can't guide you to so much on the internet. But basically, there we have it. So now the next step, would be the end of part 2. The next step would for me to be to determine the length of the cylinder I'm going to need, which I haven't bought. I have a whole bunch of these in the stockpile over there. This is a prop I'm giving to somebody. I want it to look new. I want everything to be new. I just wanted to be able to give it to them. They can push the button. I mean, of course, they're going to have to attach something to the end. I'm not going to provide a spooky doll or a dog or anything. I'm just providing a mechanism for them. But I have to determine my cylinder length. I really don't know what I think I'm going to go with a 1-inch bore. A 1-inch bore is going to give me about, I don't know exactly what the pressure is. I could talk about that in part 3, which is going to be connecting basically connecting the cylinder, connecting a solenoid valve to make that cylinder run, and kind of explain that. But for the purposes I have here, I got to determine what stroke length I'm going to need. I think I'm going to connect this here. And I'm going to go with a 1-inch bore cylinder, but it's really hard. I got to determine the force needed to extend this. As you can see, it's kind of difficult. I'm going to try to pull up on it. It's very difficult to get this going from this point, so it's going to take a lot of force, and I have to determine that force. At this closed point, this is the most force required to get this scissor mech moving. So I mean, basically, to bring it back, it's going to be real easy. As you can see, almost it closes by itself. The weight of the prop pushing down on it. This is kind of why I did a 12-degree angle also. A lot of times, if you make these things perfectly, perfectly perpendicular to the ground and straight up and down, they won't. Sometimes they don't close right. I mean, it's not a perfect science. They'll stay extended like this. For this prop, I want this whole thing to close every time. I mean, it may make a little tapping sound when it closes, but either way, I have to determine what that force is once we get this going. I've determined my stroke length and determine the force. I'm not going to get into that now. What I will get into is where I'm mounting this cylinder. We're going to require a lot more force to pull up on this slide than if I were to mount this cylinder here and push here, push and pull here. But I think the cylinder stroke length I would need from if I mounted this way to basically push on this rod. See how much easier it is? It's very easy to push this and extend this at this point if I'm pushing force this way instead of pulling up on this way. But my personal preference, I like the mechanism, the overall mechanism to have a small footprint. So basically, I want it here, so I'm not beyond this point here. This sticks out too far. Then you have to hide it, and I kind of pride myself in my little yard display, where the visitors don't see the mechanisms. I think it kind of takes away from it, and then they can guess what happens as they're walking up to the prop. Here you could, like I said, you could mount a doll, surround this with bushes, have this jump through a bush. I have another prop we call the bushwhacker, where it's a bush that on this end the bushes open up with a different mechanism, and I have a little crazy looking doll that jumps through the bushes. It's a kind of an older prop. It's been around for a while. So basically, let me figure out what my stroke is. So if it doesn't matter where you measure from, just kind of pick a point up here somewhere, and I can measure. I'm going to measure. Let's just measure to the top, and I got 10 1/4 from the top of this to the top of this slide. Now, just to determine the stroke you're going to need, extend your prop. I want mine to extend about 40 inches. So if I just put the tape measure on the end of the extended scissor mechanism, kind of eyeball. Things don't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be 40. It doesn't have to be 39. It doesn't have to be. So I'm going to extend mine. I'm going to say it's going to extend about 3 feet 38 inches, something like that. Maybe 38 inches, which is 3 foot 2 inches. So I have to determine where that point is. So just make a mark here. Just make a mark on there, and then close it up. And then measure from your starting point up here that you measured. You got 10 1/4 to the top of the slide, and I got what do I got? I got 7 inches to there. So you can't buy cylinders in increments of quarters. Some places you can get them in halves. You can buy millimeters cylinders that have a stroke length in millimeters. Those are metrics. Then you got to change all you're going to have a lot of tap and dies and not a lot of accessories easily to be found for metric cylinders. I have a bunch of them too. This is I don't think this one's. No, this is a standard cylinder. But basically, I got 10 1/4 to the top of the slide, and I got 7 inches there. So you got to use round numbers. So if I have a cylinder with 3-inch strokes, 7 inches to 10 inches, how much is that going to get me? So if I go and I measure to 7 1/4, I'm going to just make a mark on this rod at 7 1/4, and I extend my slide or extend my mechanism to where the top of my slide hits that mark. Then I can measure what's the biggest extension I'm going to get with a 3-inch cylinder, and that's still going to give me. It's still going to give me maybe 34 inches, 35 inches of extension. That's pretty good. That's 3 feet of extension out of out of a 3-inch stroke cylinder. So I think I'm going to buy a 3-inch stroke cylinder for this prop, probably 1 inch, 1.5 inch diameter. It's going to require a lot of force to get this thing moving, but like I said, once this thing, see how it kind of closes up here? Once your scissor mechanism gets to about this point, where they're all open, I don't know if you can see, yeah, they're all open, then the force required to extend it decreases. But the force required to get it from this closed point to this open point here is tremendous. I shouldn't say tremendous. It's you know, maybe a couple 100 pounds. So it's going to require you know, a 1.5 inch bore cylinder, and that's what I'm going to get. 1.5 inch, I think, by 3-inch stroke. And then we'll talk about extending the or connecting and fabricating the rest of it in part 3.